We interrupt this program to bring you an important Wayfair message. Wayfair's got style tips for every home. This is Nicole Byer, helping you make those rooms flyer. Today's style tip: when it comes to making a statement, treat bold patterns like neutrals. Go wild! Like an untamed animal print area rug under a rustic farmhouse table from Wayfair.com. Ooh, fierce! This has been your Wayfair style tip to keep those interiors superior.
Wayfair, every style, every home.
Join us and unwind with a good book. Welcome to Relaxing Reads.
Hi, it's Deb in Halifax.
Hi, it's Simone in Vancouver.
Hey, it's Tanya in Edmonton.
Our latest read, Coming to Find You by Jane Corry, is a gripping and emotional thriller. When her family tragedy is splashed across the newspapers, Nancy decides to disappear. Her grandmother's beautiful Regency house in a quiet seaside village seems like the safest place to hide. But the old house has its own secrets and a chilling wartime legacy. Now someone knows the truth about the night Nancy's mother and stepfather were murdered. Someone knows where to find her, and they have nothing to lose. Wow. This one had all kinds of interesting, complex characters, so many secrets, and crossing the generations. What did you think? How did you feel after everything was revealed, or as we were revealing things, or things were being revealed in front of us layer by layer?
I think that, as I was going through it, I asked myself questions, who is this character, and do they like each other, and who is this, and what's going to happen? It just seemed like there was always going to be a secret that was revealed, right? So I felt like this was a really fast-paced, like, let's go kind of a book. And I loved how the author used the present day and also used, the beginning of World War II as her main areas. And I just loved how she weaved the characters together and how they were all related. And I loved all the surprises. And it just kept me turning the pages.
Yeah, everything Tanya said. And, it was interesting because sometimes with the dual timelines, there's room to kind of get confused or try to figure things out. I felt like this was really easy. The flow was great. And it did make me want to keep reading because it's like it would leave you in a place and you were like, what is happening next with this character? But then you had to read the part of the other character before you got back to that character. So every chapter ended with you wanting more, and that's really nice in a mystery or a thriller like this, that it can keep you going from beginning to end, just wanting more. And I think that's why it was definitely a quicker read for me, because it kept me in. It didn't really lose me any way along the way. And like Tanya said, yes, like every character had their own secrets. So you're like, how many secrets are going to be revealed here?
I know. I felt like sometimes I'm easily confused when we go back and forth through different generations, different years. But this one, I wasn't. I felt like it was like visiting a relatives. So you go and you hear a story about what happened when, and then, mom and dad are like, okay, time to go, say goodbye, and we'll be back again. So I felt like, I was tuned in because I knew I'd be back, or somebody would share something else with me.
You're right, Deb. Like, it really was. I mean, it's told from the point of view of Nancy, who's in present day, and Elizabeth, who's, World War 1941. And I really felt like the chapters were very fluid. Like, I can get easily confused as well. And I go, wait a minute, who is that? And then I have to go back to the book and go, oh yeah, that's so-and-so who's married to so-and-so who's, it gets really in depth. But with this book, she did a really great job of connecting those two people and connecting all of the characters. So when I was finished reading Nancy and all of a sudden it's Elizabeth's turn, I'm like, I'm right back in there. Like it didn't take any time to get right back into 1941 and the horrors of war and what was going on. And then, right back to sort of the horrors of present day with Nancy and the murder of her mom and her stepdad. And so I loved going back and forth. I didn't get confused. I felt like it added to the depth of the stories that were being told. And I absolutely just kind of plowed through this book. Loved it.
Yeah. And when we go back to wartime and the family home, that place, I mean, I think it brought so much to so many of the characters that we meet, both the beauty of it, but, during wartime, the horrors that surrounded it. It was, I guess, a character on its own.
Yeah. And even just going back to them having their secrets, and then there's Elizabeth, who kind of takes the secret to the grave. And then there's Nancy, who needs to just share it and take accountability. That was really interesting. And also, like, we're seeing the relationships between Elizabeth and, her husband, the teacher, Adeline, her relationship with George and Henry, Nancy's relationship, but then the best friend storyline too, whereas like Elizabeth and Adeline had such a great friendship. And I think that's something Nancy was trying to strive for with Claire, but just couldn't get there. Hopefully, in the end, that's what's going to happen. But yeah, the connectivity was really cool because you're seeing the two versions of it, but yet they both had such similar stories.
Yeah. Elizabeth had some great relationships with other female characters as well, like, the little kids, the little girls, along with her best friend.
I just loved all the characters. I thought that I really got into them all. And, I always judge a great book by if I'm going to miss them, once I read the last few pages, am I going to miss kind of talking to them? Because I really felt like they lived in my head. The little girls, Maisie and and Shirley. And, one of the things that really kind of profoundly affected me with this book was World War II. I mean, there's a great quote. I think it's from the curator of the museum in Nancy's story, how he says, I'm just trying to think, I had a quote here, Jeremy, and he says, your generation needs reminding about the war just as future generations will need reminding about the virus. In reading this book, and I think the chapter, with Elizabeth and Adeline and all of them, they really profoundly affected me because I'm a very sensitive person, and the horrors of war, like, really mess up my head. And, and I'm reading about what they had to do during wartime. And the beach that they used to play on was now filled with barbed wire and mines. And they kept hearing planes overhead. And then there's the secret army. You have neighbors who don't trust neighbors. So everything is like all messed up. And then, you have Adeline and Elizabeth joining the secret army. And they're going, okay, so, that could you kill somebody? Here's a gun. Could you kill somebody? Because you're going to have to. If you get a message and you see someone you don't know or someone you have to swallow it. And, if you get captured, here's a cyanide pill. It really messes up my head. And I felt viscerally sort of the horrors of war. I felt like the author kind of really put that through. And that's because I'm just so sensitive to that stuff. And I think a lot of people are. And I just, I wonder about today's society. Like, I wonder, could you send your 17-year-old son to war, or your 17-year-old daughter? You're sending them off to the unknown. And I feel like war is awful and horrible. And I just wonder if there's certainly a lot of unrest today. Like, what if all the shit goes down? Like, what are we prepared? Like Elizabeth, like Adeline, like Robert, who went to war at 17, comes back damaged, are we prepared to sacrifice? And I asked myself that question, and I asked it throughout this book. And I'm like, honestly, I just don't know. I feel like I would run and hide, but you can't. You have to stand up for what you believe, And so anyway, sorry to go on about that, but it just really, those chapters really affected me. And I just get all kind of weird because I feel like the world is shifting again. And I don't know. I don't know where we're going. I don't know where we're going and who's right and who's wrong and what people will do in the name of power. And I just, crazy.
Yeah. And so young, like when you think about the characters and, the true humans, the people that we may have known or we've heard of who went through that war and the current conflicts in our world. And they're all so very young. having to deal with some very adult issues, and you don't have time to think. I don't know that I could be who they were and still come out. If you survived and didn't have damage, I don't know that I could survive beyond that. It's I can't imagine myself in those positions either.
But Tanya, like you said, it's important to be reminded of it, and sometimes we do we have those thoughts and you get caught up in your day to day, but there's this whole past and this whole history. And, they always mention history repeats itself. And I think you're never really prepared for, what could happen. You just kind of have to deal with it as it comes. So that's kind of the scary reality of things. And, the pandemic doesn't compare to the war, but again, it was a time of uncertainty. It was a time of panic. And, those feelings kind of come up. And if anything, those people who lived through the war and now they've lived through the pandemic, it's just that uneasiness of what comes with that and those feelings. But again, it's something that we do need to think about. We do need to reflect on. We have that day with Remembrance Day, but throughout the year, novels like this make you want to kind of search out and do some your own digging to make sure you're not just turning a blind eye to it, because you shouldn't. We should know what's happened in our past and how hopefully things like that don't repeat themselves. You hope that we could get to that place.
Yeah. And I just love the whole mystery of the book. There was you just never really knew what was going on. And I just love that. I love that. I was questioning, what did Nancy, from the very beginning that Nancy didn't tell the truth. So the whole book, you're like, what happened? And then you find about these despicable characters, Duncan, her stepdad, and Martin, the creepy stepbrother, and
oh my gosh,
and just what people will or won't do, and what people will do in the time of war. I think Polly, the girlfriend of one of the characters, she's like, it was war, it changes everything.
Yeah,
and it's true.
Yeah.
And I kind of liked how Jane, the author, put the two side by side in those chapters. Nancy's the present, Elizabeth is the past, and how she used the same area. So it's like, as the reader, you're like in present day Sidmouth. Is it Sidmouth? Sidmouth?
Sidmouth?
The name of the town, Sidmouth, and Tall Chimneys, the name of the house. So you're there in present day and what Nancy's going through. And then the next chapter, you go to Elizabeth, who has a boarding house. It's a boarding house and all these characters in it. They're walking along the same beach. They're seeing the same rocks. But in a totally different time frame, which I thought was really, really cool.
Well, it makes you think of where you live and the people who have walked through the same roads and the same beaches and the same lands before your time, right? Or who's lived in your home if you have an older home. Like, who's been in there? What are the stories? Because this home had a lot of stories and secrets attached to it, right?
Oh my gosh, yeah.
So many. Well, I was just thinking about that. I mean, I came back from Montreal, and that's such an amazing city. But you're walking down in Old Town, you're walking down streets that are like, 350, almost 400 years old. Who has walked there? If you go to Rome, right? You're walking on. It's just so, when you start thinking about it, it's like, wow, all the stuff that's happened.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
It's crazy.
And the secrets that they've had to hold on to for so many years. Oh my gosh.
But you had that revelation where Elizabeth finally told Adeline her big secret. And then you had the moment where Claire finally told Nancy her secret. And, you get to a place where I think there are some that could probably hold on to it forever. But then some people just spill their guts. So it makes you just think, like, how long could you hold something onto for? Before finally being free of it and releasing the demons that haunt you in the form of nightmares or panic attacks or things that are happening. They say the truth shall set you free, right? So there's the freedom in that, but then there's the whole concept of, some secrets that aren't terrible secrets, but you just don't want to hurt someone, a friend or somebody like that, and you don't know what to do with that information.
Yeah. I've heard, like, in recent years, like, friends of the family, and having to hide a pregnancy or, who the parents were and having to, shift the baby into another household. And then years later, when you're told about the connections and then you see how those connections, how those people had different relationships outside of what they truly were on paper. And it's heartwarming. It's interesting and wild at the same time. But as I was reading that, I was thinking about some of the folks that I've heard of who've had to hide some of those things over the years and how they must feel now.
And it's sort of like, when do you tell the truth and when do you not tell the truth? Like to your point, Simone, you're like, well, you don't sometimes because you don't want to hurt somebody. Those little white lies, right? So, and, Elizabeth takes her secrets to the grave and we find out, the boxes in the cellar. We find out.
Oh, my God.
So then she didn't really take it to the grave. Like she wanted it to be discovered. But again, it was after her time. Mm-hmm. So at some point she knew, like when she left this earth, it wasn't going to completely be gone.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Did you guys think that Nancy and Stephen would get together? I kind of thought they would.
I kind of did.
You mean Elizabeth and Stephen?
Or Elizabeth, yeah.
I'm sorry.
Yes.
I'm sorry,
yeah.
Elizabeth and Stephen. Sorry.
Yes.
Yeah, Elizabeth and Stephen, yeah.
Well, Henry just seemed like a terrible time.
Oh, my gosh, wasn't he? I know.
But again,
I know.
But it's, again, based on what he had been through. He was injured.
Yeah.
He couldn't fight in the war. So it's like we talk about the young son or the young child you don't want to send away. But then there's some people who maybe were like, I want to go fight for my country and my country's freedom, but I can't. And so it's, that whole weird side of things.
And the self-worth, like, who am I if I can't do this? Then I might as well be this other person on the side.
Yeah. But for her to go and start a new life in Canada when Adeline was going to start that life in Canada. And then, even when you later find out that Violet was Nancy's mom, because they don't really say the name in the beginning. So that was interesting, that connection there. And I, as I was reading, I was like, okay, so what happened to Violet that maybe she shunned away from? So she didn't really support the daughter, but nothing really was told on that side of the story about her. But, such an interesting thing. And you think about the silent sentences, right? People who are serving these sentences and their side of things.
Mm-hmm. I felt like I wanted to know more about Violet,
Yes.
Because her mom was so cool. They mentioned in the book that she wore pants, at that time women didn't wear pants, and she was very feisty and she was the one who was talking about the secret army and she's the one who had the affair with the Canadian pilot. And she, I don't know, she was just a trailblazer.
And she didn't care what people thought of her, after the fact. Here she is, no husband and the affair and a baby and people labeling her. But yeah. So doting on her baby.
Mm-hmm. And then everything coming, on Nancy's part, finding out about Violet, finding out about who her... I'm trying to think now, her grandfather was, her real grandfather? So is Adeline her grandmother, right?
Grandmother.
So she thought that, right, because that would be, Adeline was the mother of Violet. I get confused sometimes. And then finding out that, she's looking at pictures going, well, who is that? Who is that? And finds out that, her grandfather was a Canadian. It wasn't George. Anyway, it was just like, it's interesting how she discovers all these things about personal history. And I think we have all had situations where you find stuff about your history too that you didn't know, which is fascinating, right?
And I loved some of those things that, she didn't know about. Like you had characters like Maisie showing up again and filling in all the information and being told and getting that intel, or even with the ripping up the letter and the whole Jasmine and the Alex, and they knew each other, like the connection there, because you didn't quite know what was going to happen there, or who was responsible. But I was surprised with, this type of thriller. What was interesting is usually you wait right till the end to find out, or like something was going to happen with Martin, but it kind of happened in the middle. So you're like, oh, good riddance. Are we done with that character now? Okay. But I was like, so what's going to happen from this point on? Like, is there another character coming in who's going to be torturing her or stalking her? But no, it just went a different route. And I kind of quite enjoyed that. So it was like, we didn't have to be as scared, but we were still unraveling so much more.
Yeah. There was a lot of that, wasn't there? Especially with him. It was very heavy. And what was he going to do? Where was he, going to take it? And then, learning about, how it unraveled with the two of them in the end. It was, it's a lot going on.
I liked how the author revealed little surprises throughout the book. Like you said, Simone, we didn't wait until the very end of the book to find out, everything. It was all revealed throughout the book. And then, I thought when Martin was done with, I thought, well, where are we going now? We're not done the book. We've got quite a few pages, right? So I liked where it went.
But except for the last page where we found out some shocking news as well. So right till the last page.
Yeah, honestly.
But it makes me interested in reading some of her other novels. Like this was really well done.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And Maisie, you mentioned her, being introduced to her or reintroduced to her at a different stage in her life as an older woman and going back to that house. And then her having, Maisie having those feelings as the child that stayed there, that lived there, that played there with her little best friend and the emotions that came with that as well. And then to hear, what she thought she saw versus what may have happened around that time.
I know. And as I was reading it, as we read our books every month, there's some that I'm like, oh, I definitely want to pass this on to someone to read. And this was one of those books because I'm like, this is going to be one that I recommend for sure to others to read.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll be passing it off to my sister.
She's got the collection now.
Yeah, she's getting the collection. I always make sure I know which ones I give her, though, because I'm like, I want that back.
I know.
I want it back.
I think about that, too, because my best friend will lend me books, and then sometimes I forget to give them back. But the ones I've given to her, I'm kind of like, I want them back, because we have our little book club collection, and it's like when they're missing, I'm like, I want to know. Like, Deb, you and I have been here since day one, and we've been reading, all these books, and I'm like, it's kind of a special thing to just lend it, but then have it back in your library as a reminder. But
exactly.
Do you
guys have a special place for your books? Do you have a section that you keep all the books that you've done?
I keep them at the radio station here. I have a shelf, and so I've got all them separated by year. And so kind of when we started in 2021, and then just kind of plopping them through in that way.
Nice.
But
I'm not as organized as you. I'd like to be. I do have a shelf in my bedroom, and I have most of them there, but they're kind of intertwined with other things, so they kind of get missed in the shuffle or get lost. And I do have a couple that I've lent out and forgot about it until recently. One of my friends said, by the way, I still have whatever book it was. So when you lend me the next one that you've recommended, I'll return the other one. I'm like, oh, yeah, I'd like to have that back.
But what's kind of neat is I can't say I've gone back and reread a book, but I was thinking of that. I was like, well, instead of rereading it, I could just throw on one of our podcasts and go back in time and listen to what it was about. So I'm like, that would save some time. But I really enjoyed this read, and I'm really looking forward to talking to Jane about it.
Yes.
We look forward to chatting with Jane Corry and talking all things Coming to Find You on our next Relaxing Reads podcast. Hope you'll tune in. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for kicking back and relaxing with us. We hope you'll join us again on Relaxing Reads.